trivialize this, but the bumper sticker response is exploring how we connect our theological frame to the public square. And how do we give leadership to conversations in the public square that both advocate for justice, but also advocate for compassion and for changing the hostile atmosphere that seems to prevail right now in our country. How do we find a way to talk with one another? How do we find a way to excavate the issues, identify what some of our passions are, and where are we hurting, but also where are we really angry? And how do we care for our people, those that we serve, and help them articulate the stuff they're experiencing, but in the context of how we are called to be in the public square with a witness for justice and healing. So that's kind of a snapshot response to that. And we're going to spend a good bit of time looking at texts that come not so much from the theological world, although we certainly will do that, but who are some of the people talking now through their writing about what they see and what the wisdom is they bring to these conversations. So for example, we're looking at one text would be John Meacham's book, The Soul of America, which is a really interesting text because it helps give us a kind of sweep of history and how issues have come up along the way. And Meacham's an interesting guy because he's out of the South. He knows the culture really well. And he talks about how the country has come through other difficult times of conflict and upheaval. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to put together, the theological frame with voices in the culture that help us understand better what is the ethical responsibility of people of faith to be in the public square with the message of redemption, hope, and healing that we bring. But we also bring a message of how do we understand what is just, what is justice, and how do we help people work at that?
That's great, John. Yeah, I mean, I think I would only add to that, because I think that's so comprehensive. I think I would add the sense that everybody is a public theologian, and maybe what we want to try to do is extrovert that or amplify that. All of the people that are in ministry, all the people who are doing parachurch, all the people who are attorneys, teachers, all of us who are people of faith, not just Christians, are actually already doing public theology. And we're doing it when we tweet, we're doing it when we echo something on Facebook, we're doing it in the classroom, right? We're doing it in our families. How do we get people to be literally self-conscious about that and self-critical about that? And especially disrupting the sense that theology only belongs inside the four walls of a church, right? That's where the preaching is, and that's where the music is, and that's where the transformation is. I think we really both believe, and Drew also, that the transformational moments required of our faith to create a more just society are happening all the time, all around us. So how do we equip leaders for that? How do we prepare people to take themselves to that space of brave, compassionate, prophetic critique, narrating another way to be, describing God's vision in the world? I think that's important. And I think we would want to say on the upfront that we hope that this will be, as John is saying, interdisciplinary. So we're not just doing like Christian texts and Christian theologians, but also politicians, political history, ethical writers, some psychology of religion, and as much as we can, given that we're Christians, though universalist, also texts from other religions, so that we're creating a table that is, oh, in this America that is this diverse, here is the way toward the future from a lens of theology in the public square. Great question, Scott. I mean, I think, let me talk about it at Middle for a second and see what John will want to say about the program. I mean, I think Middle is a Christian church. It just is. And it's a progressive Christian church. We're left of left sometimes. But our members include Jews, one Muslim, one Muslim who takes communion every time we serve it, every first Sunday, and Jewish members who got baptized not to convert, but because they said we took the ritual from them and they wanted it back. Interfaith families, people who are acknowledged agnostics. So what I would say our belief system is we all share a belief in love as a revolutionary tool, or revolutionary love, we might say, or love, period. And so so when we say diverse, I would want to be candid to say, however you get to everyone should have enough food, I'm not talking to you, Siri. However you get to everyone should have enough food, however you get to children should have safe places to play, mass incarceration needs to be addressed, right? Folks should be able to vote. Whatever gets you to that set of ethical assumptions, cool. All of that diversity that gets you to those, we wouldn't be honest to say, and you could be inside our church and be a gay basher. That's not honest. It would be dishonest to say, you could be in our church and think white people are better than black people. That's not true. So the shared belief system is a belief in the value of all human beings, right? And the care of the earth. And so that's lovely. And I think people can see that, understand that the paths that lead to heaven and earth, shalom, we're all on those paths together, however we think about it. And I think that would be, I think if students were thinking, wow, I'm going to come to this program and they're not going to push me out of my comfort zone if I'm, wondering about racism, or, you're going to be pushed out of your comfort zone if you're wondering about racism as a real deal. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. John, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. A couple of things, I guess, that are part of this conversation for me. One is more and more we're encountering folks who have left the institutional church. They are looking for something else. They're looking for a place with less sort of creedal requirements, with more openness to explore their spirituality without having to fit into the right answers to the right questions. And so what we're trying to do, and we'll do in this course, is try to open a window on that for our participants so that they have a chance to excavate the reality and how it's shifting in this country in terms of religious affiliation. I'm going to ask them to read The End of White Christianity by Robbie Jones. We're going to look deeply into the shifting patterns in this country as it applies to religion and the distinction now many people are making between religion and spirituality. So that we understand we have to do some things differently if we really want to speak clearly to people now. They're not content to just buy into what has been in our main religious traditions, our primary religious traditions. So it's not just Christians who are looking for something else. Our experience is people all across the landscape are looking for something else, at least generationally. I know in New Jersey, which is my Methodist conference, Greater New Jersey, I look at the annual conference reports over the last few years, and more churches are closing.
Yeah.
They cannot keep pace with the rising costs, the fixed costs of just opening the facility. They're aging out. They don't have leadership that can carry the responsibilities of a faith community, and nobody's coming in behind them to pick it up. So that alone is distressing the denomination, frankly, because they see the numbers continuing to fall, and nobody has come up with the magic solution for how to put your finger in the dike to keep it from spiraling downward anymore. So there is a huge generational shift underway, and that has great implications for how we think about who's out there now that we could create safe space for them to really be on their spiritual search and feel supported in that search rather than pushed into some conformed pattern. So all of that leads to a multi-faith kind of focus for us. And we will want to invite our participants in the course to think about that larger sort of diagnosis of where we are.
Yeah, that's really well said, John.
Yeah, is we're going to ask them to pull together a group of conversation partners in their own setting. And we're not limiting that to folks in their setting who currently are on their boards or on their formalized, somehow leaders in their formalized structure, although some of them would be natural to include. We would like to encourage them to think about a leader that's in the larger community who would be willing to be in that conversation with them around this course. We will give them a protocol for what we want those conversation groups to do and look like, so that there's some diversity there, but there also be enacting what we're after, which is connecting the theological frame to the public square. So who are the folks in the public square who they could invite into their conversation group? So we're asking them to do that, and that those folks would have a regular pattern of meeting, and they would be not just folks who would be asked in any way to play an evaluative role, but to bring to the conversation some aspects of the life of the larger community, and also to see what the theological frame has to offer around real issues that are lively where they are. So we're excited about that, and we think that will enrich the situation in the local setting, but it also, particularly where congregational or faith community members are participating in those groups, it offers the opportunity for them to both learn and also be part of a change process.
Well, I think what you're saying, Scott, is we're all about to have a shared event that might be catastrophic. And it's going to be catastrophic for somebody, no matter what the outcome is, because the nation is so polarized. So I think, as a pastor who has a 501c3, and I can't really, quote, risk it by advocating for any particular candidate, I think we know that the leaders who join the cohort this January, post the midterms, are going to be dealing with, I'm going to say, trauma, and I'm going to say hope, disappointment, resilience, no matter what the outcomes are. So how do we take those things into consideration for our own use of self as leader? So I'll bring my psychology to that. How are these events objects in our own psychodynamic world? And also, how do we help our congregations to use their faith-based self, if you will, in the healing of America, in the changing of the story, you know, in the navigating of new outcomes, and of living in this moment in time. Like, we're not going to pretend like this isn't a tough moment in time. It's not a neutral moment in time, right? This administration and the dynamics in Congress have us in a uniquely conflicted moment in time. So how do we navigate change? How do we navigate conflict? How do we help the people in our sphere of influence feel like they have agency and things that they can do in their own public world to create the world we want? I think those are some of the ways that we'll think about it. I also think, again, theory's not neutral, theology's not neutral, we're not neutral, nobody's neutral. So I think it's going to be important that John and Terry and I, and any of the faculty, help people to name and own their own stuff. So we're going to do stuff about Myers-Briggs, stuff about emotional intelligence, stuff about awareness, how we, with really beautiful exercises around my conflict style, you know, how to build coalitions. So it'll be really both academic and practical around how to be a person, you know, how to be a person in these times. Kevin, I think because we imagine that the cohort will be diverse, we really do, in terms of where they come from, or religious background, or let's say denominational or theological background. I think there'll be a real-time opportunity for people in this cohort to be in dialogue with folks who, like them, care about the world, but might even expect a different, let's say, what a good society looks like might be slightly different, right? So here's going to be a table that we're going to make safe for people from different races, from different genders, from different sexualities, and perhaps even different faiths, to talk to each other, to react with each other to these events that are happening on our national stage and also around the globe, which in itself then is a skill. I'm thinking about young people right now who are having table talks to get Republicans and Democrats to talk together. There will be a real safe place, a real safe container to explore history, to explore sociology, to explore psychology and theology, and turn those conversations toward the lens right now. So what? So what does this mean?
Sure.
How do we go forward? So that's one. I think this other place too, for me, as leader, how do we use ourselves? How do we know ourselves? I don't think most people in theological work, Kevin, have enough chance to sit down and think about their interior life. And it can feel like navel gaze, but who has time? And we need time. We need time to think about our own stories. And John and I both work in a narrative frame. How did I get here? How did I get to be me? What are these events doing, showing up in my own personal history? How do I keep my, I say, spiritual teeth clean? How do I floss my own spiritual teeth so that when I'm leading, I'm moving from a centered place, a self-aware place, an emotionally intelligent place? John does great work on self-awareness and self-empowerment, and my theological stuff comes in play there, both around like self-psychology, Erik Erikson, developmental psychology, but mostly narrative theology. How do we be the best people we are in this time of turmoil? And that, when John talks about the cohort of people working with you, also then we imagine these leaders being able to mentor, let's say disciple, let's say engage with people in their context to share that kind of way to be wisdom in a time where we're going to obviously be in conflict. How do you teach other people how to manage conflict and change? So we hope there's going to be a ripple effect. And I think in our highest intention, we are, all of us, learning how to de-escalate violence, how to be nonviolent communicators, how to be civil disobedience disciples, how to take the best wisdom from the texts that are not just Bible texts, like King's Letter from a Birmingham jail, or writings by Ella Baker, or, Howard Thurman, so that there is an increasing human people that understand that love is an ample and powerful response to what I call hot mess times.
In terms of outcomes, Kevin, I think in a sort of larger frame, we really want the students to have the opportunity to revisit their call. And I say that this way: when I entered the ministry, one of the things I had to do was I had to write a paper that described my call to ministry. Once I got in, once I was approved by the Board of Ordained Ministry and I was ordained, no one for the entire rest of my ministry asked me a question about my sense of call.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, my sense of call has morphed many times across the years. I've had to rework that sense of call numerous times across the years. That sense of call, in my mind, has everything to do with our theological frame, our spiritual frame, and how we see it as a source of unequivocal motivation to turn the world upside down.
Sure.
Which means we're really called to take a significant number of risks along the way. They shouldn't be casual, those decisions. They should be well informed. We should be able to think through whether what we feel compelled and called to do in a particular moment can be done, and how do we get around us the kind of support we need to do what we feel God's calling us to do. That has to do with how we mobilize our faith community, how we help them understand what call is for them as well as for us. So it's a very important piece to this whole conversation for me, and Jacqui as well, that we draw people into that conversation and invite them to think about what are their fundamental convictions.
Yeah. We were both at the Alban Institute, which was a think act tank, if you will, I guess, to make congregation strong.
Yeah.
And one time there, it was my job. I was the senior consultant for negotiating cultural boundaries, which meant something like race and religion. We did a small conference there. Curtis DeYoung came, and we were testing that idea. And when I moved on to middle church, Alban felt it didn't have the capacity to do these conversations anymore. And I was like, well, I'll do it. So we decided to offer a conference for leaders with the primary objective to be, let's learn how to be on the border. Let's learn how to lead on the border. And we meant of culture, sexuality, religion, race. Let's learn how to lead on the border. Let's have a leading edge. I think the first one we might have had 100 people. I think the next year, and then 500. And what we have found is that as we got more specific about my internet connection.
Yeah, you were fading out.
Okay, I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah.
As we got more specific about race and gender and class, registrations went up. So really clear that leaders are interested in turning their theological lens on race and culture and class. And so that's what happens. We've had faculty from Van Jones and Marianne Williamson to William Barber and Tracy Blackman, young activists on the street like Genesis B, dealing with the Mississippi flag, the Confederate flag, artists, actors. It has been such a joy to watch this thing turn into a place where people can't wait to come. A couple of years ago, we began to partner with Valerie Court, who's just a badass, amazing writer, amazing speaker, a Sikh, an SIKH leader. And this year, our conference is more and more interfaith. So Simranjeet, who's a Sikh, and another young woman from Canada, and Jewish folks, and Muslim folks like Linda Sarsour and Wajahat Ali, and Christian faith leaders. It's going to be stunning. And if you only join this cohort, come to the Revolutionary Love Conference 3 times, you should do that, because it'll be free to you. And your faculty moves beyond me and John and Terry Todd to like a world of leaders who are world-class leaders.